Many disabled people are concerned about the impact of government reform to disability benefits. The government says that financial assistance will be channeled to those most in need after major welfare reform was passed earlier this year. Ministers claim that at least $600 million a year is needlessly wasted, and the changes are estimated to save billions of pounds from the bill for disability allowances. But already there have been allegations and protests that ATOS, the agency charged with assessing whether people are fit to work, and a major Paralympic sponsor too, is not executing the first stage of reform fairly. Here's Sancha Berg.
Crowds cheer the Paralympic torch, while many disabled people in Britain are worried about their own future as benefits change. Ella Findlay has multiple sclerosis. She works as a recruitment advisor for disabled people. Disability Living Allowance helps pay for her car and her scooter. She's concerned her benefit will be cut.
If it weren't for the mobility element of my DLA, I wouldn't have my job. I wouldn't be able to get to my job. I wouldn't have a reliable car, all of these things. So it enables me to remain independent and provide, you know, pay my taxes, all of these things. So I remain, you know, financially semi-independent.
The broad aim of the two main disability benefits remains the same. Incapacity benefit, now called Employment Support Allowance, is for people who can't work. Disability Living Allowance, soon to be Personal Independence Payment, is to help people with their daily lives, for the employed, unemployed, even children. Since 2003, claims for incapacity benefit have fallen, while claims for DLA have risen. It costs the government over £12 billion a year, more than double the cost of job seekers' allowance.
The key thing is to make sure that resources are used efficiently, and one would hope that that could involve substantial savings, but also that those resources actually enable people to overcome disabilities, to overcome problems, and actually be economically productive and largely self-sufficient. That's got to be the aim of the policy, and just because it's a controversial area of policy, just because it's an area that often rouses very high emotions in the debate, I don't think that that's a reason for the coalition not to tackle it.
This is the headquarters of the French firm Atos. They run medical assessments of disabled people on behalf of the government to check whether they're fit for work. They've made many mistakes, campaigners say, and to mark that, on the eve of the London Paralympic Games, they've staged their own rather macabre stunt. Presenting Atos, a Paralympic sponsor, with a coffin. That stands, they say, for hundreds of people who've died after they were assessed by Atos as able to work and their incapacity benefit was withdrawn. Nearly 40% of appeals against Atos assessments are upheld. And from next year, Atos will be assessing claimants for disability living allowance too. Atos said that it did not make decisions on people's benefit entitlement or on welfare policy, but provided a service as highly professional and compassionate as it can be.
The reason that Disability Living Allowance came about in the first place was under the Conservative government of Thatcher. They understood that people with disabilities faced extra costs in competing or managing their lives in a disabledist world. So that's the reason it was given in the first place. It was to make sure that those people got what they needed. We're not taking money for no reason, and it's not something that we're just grabbing and pocketing.
One significant change: the most disabled used to get disability living allowance automatically. That won't be the case with personal independence payments.
It can sound a harsh thing to say, that there are not going to be blanket entitlements, that things need to be properly assessed and tested. I think that there hasn't been proper assessment, and that the more you go down a long list of saying that this particular problem or this particular disability will automatically render you eligible for receipt of DLA, I think you actually start to remove a lot of the discretion that we need to show in each particular circumstance.
The Paralympics will be the face of disability for the next 11 days, but once the Games are over, the difficult issue of disability benefits will come to the fore again.
Sandra Berg, well, more from our panel in a moment, but earlier I spoke to the Minister for Disabled People, Maria Miller. The reforms that are going to come in next year when Disability Living Allowance becomes Personal Independent Payments. By the DWP's figures, you hope to save 20% of the budget by 2015. One would say in this recessionary times a laudable aim. Will you do it?
What we're going to be doing with the reform of Disability Living Allowance is continue to spend the same amount as we were last year by 2015-16. So in fact, what we're trying to do is to keep the amount of spending on Disability Living Allowance and the future on PIP under control. And I think that's important because at the moment we know that more than £600 million a year is going out in overpayments to people who no longer qualify for the level of benefit support that they're receiving. It's important we have those sorts of checks in place. At the moment there's no way of reassessing individuals, and these are all important things to do, and particularly now at a time where we have the Paralympics in London, that we have a benefit system that's there to support people and not potentially leave them trapped in benefit dependency.
But let's talk about the incoming assessments which are going to be done by ATOS. Many of those for whom Disability Living Allowance is automatic will not necessarily qualify for Personal Independence Payments. Let me just read you the list. Severe mental impairment, deaf blindness, severe visual impairment, double amputees, hemodialysis. That means you would not necessarily automatically qualify for these Personal Independent Payments if you're a double amputee.
I don't think there's anybody who's advocating a benefit that focuses in on an individual's impairment. What most disability organisations, and indeed most disabled people want, is a disability system, a support system, which focuses on their everyday needs, not whether or not they've got this condition or that condition. We're working with more than 60 disability organisations to put together the new Personal Independence Payment. That's the approach they've asked us to take, and that's the approach we've taken.
Let's look at the changes to incapacity benefit that have been changed to ESA. Now, there have been 40% appealing, and of those 40%, 38% have had the decision reversed. Why is that?
Well, obviously the employment support allowance is very different to the Personal Independence Payment. Employment support allowance is whether or not you're able to get into work. And yes, there are appeals there. Yes, we are working with the court system to make sure that we can do everything we can to understand why those appeals are happening. And indeed, we're working now with the judges to understand that much better.
Minister, we've spoken to the Citizens Advice Bureau, and what they're talking about is the length of time of the wait for appeal being a year. Can you guarantee that under the new system of personal independence payments that nobody's going to have to wait for a year for their appeal?
Well, the system with Disability Living Allowance at the moment, and indeed with Personal Independence Payment, is quite different. If people are reassessed under the Disability Living Allowance, there is, yes, you can appeal, but you don't continue to receive payments after you've been found ineligible for the benefit.
Exactly my point.
But that's the system at the moment.
But if there's a year's wait for appeal, as there has been so far in certain cases, that could be extremely debilitating for people.
Well, first and foremost, we are working, as I said, with more than 60 disability organisations to make sure that we get the assessment right and that it is implemented correctly. And in fact, we're going to be undertaking our assessments in a very different way to the way they're done with the work capability assessment, using regional contracts, using NHS, using 2 different companies to administer it. So we are very much working on making sure that we do get this right.
Well, finally, Minister, can you explain why so many disability groups are very critical of these changes? Scope, for example.
Well, clearly it's a change to a benefit that has been in place for almost 20 years. What we have been doing, though, and I think this has been acknowledged by many organisations, is working hard to make sure that we get the changes in the assessment right, and most importantly of all, making sure that this benefit is all about helping individuals live an independent life, not simply categorising them based on their impairment.
So Scope entirely wrong in their criticism?
Well, I've been working very closely with Scope, with Mind, with many other organisations, but actually as importantly, with disabled people themselves. And what they tell me that they want the benefit to do is to help them live a more independent life. At the moment, we have more than £600 million of disability living allowance going out to people who are no longer eligible for that benefit. I think it's incumbent upon the government to make sure that we fix that, so that we make sure that money is going where it's needed. And we will be continuing to spend as much money in 2015-16 as we were last year on this benefit, and that's actually more than the entire budget for the Department for Transport.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Well, we still have Shannon, Anne and Francesca, but joining us is Mark Littlewood, who you saw there in the film, Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs. First of all, Shannon, the Minister is right, isn't she, that the money has to go to those most in need. Money is being wasted. 2 million more people claim it now than when 1992, the DLA came in 1992. Something has to be done.
I do realise that things need to be done, and everybody is in a difficult position financially, and there are various benefits that need to be cut. But I think that with the focus on DLA, what they're doing just isn't going to help anybody. I know that she's talking about that they're talking with and working with disability organisations. All the disability organisations I know completely disagree with what their proposed changes to the DLA are. And the same with disabled people I know. Most people I know are scared. The people who I see on Twitter are scared. The implications for the changes are incredibly worrying, incredibly debilitating, and they are not going to provide people with independence. Yes, people want to be helped into leading an independent life, but that's exactly what DLA does.
Well, the Disability Living Allowance was given at the time when it was started in 1992 as an allowance for life. That is changing now. How do you feel, Anne, about being reassessed?
I think I feel terribly disappointed, because it doesn't change the fact that I still have a disability. I've had it since I was born, and to be reassessed now is just something that means I may not get the help that I need in my progress through life. If I didn't have the support from DLA in the first place, I'm not sure I would have become an occupational therapist and been part of society the way that I am. So for me now, you know, I'm certain it would change my life in a very negative way.
Well, Mark Littlewood, and the evidence of the incapacity benefit changes and the assessments for that, are you confident that it's going to be the right kind of assessment for people with disability?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I'm not here to be a spokesperson for Atos, no. and we would need to keep that under review. I am sure that the government is right to look at this. It is a very complicated area, but some of the numbers that you've mentioned, Kirsty, I mean, we've seen in the last 9 years, is it, the number of claimants go up from 2 million to 3.2 million. That should give us, I think, pause for considerable thought, especially seeing those numbers go up as IB has fallen. So we have not had a robust system of making sure that those people claiming really are entitled. This has got to be looked into.
But is that a measure of success that IB has fallen, then, incapacity benefits fallen as a result of the new test?
Well, I think there is some measure of success there. I mean, the question would be, what, if you like, is the optimum number of appeals? Your film mentioned that 40% appeal and 40% of those are successful. You would clearly want a process where there are appeals.
And not within a year. I mean, you must admit that the year, it's obviously not your responsibility, but it seems extraordinary.
Unsurprisingly, the processes of government are moving far too slowly.
Now, Francesca, you know, what's your feeling about assessment? Because your life has changed since you were assessed, and you're a successful comedian. What do you think about that?
I could save people a lot of time and resources by saying I'm not going to wake up at tomorrow and say, I'm not wobbly, wow. Money could be better spent. Let's be honest, this isn't welfare reform, it's welfare cuts. The Minister Chris Grayling talked about tough love, getting people back to work. Well, this benefit has a 0.3% of a fraud rate. It's tiny. I'd like to say Chris Grayling himself was implicated in the MP expenses scandal for over £10,000. Where's the tough love for the banks? Where's the tough love for the corporations who still pay little or no tax? And where's the tough love for our own government? Half of the MPs were implicated in the expenses scandals. I think we need to ask ourselves who the real scoundrels in society really are.
But Anne, what do you say to the government? They say that 600 million is being spent in the wrong way and wasted. Presumably that money, if it was reassessed, could go to people in real need.
I think you can't look at a benefit that's been working for 20 years effectively and say that it should be somewhere else. Why change something that's been working really, really quite well for everybody in this case?
Tell me though, Shannon, here you are, you're going to be training, you're training as a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with a bit of luck, you'll end up as a partner in a high-flying media law firm. You'll be earning shed loads of money if you do that. Why should you have a disability allowance when the taxpayer is struggling anyway? And why would you have that as a matter of right?
Well, firstly, no amount of money, no amount of promotions or jobs are going to make me walk again. I could be a partner of a firm, I still wouldn't be able to walk, I still wouldn't be able to use the tubes or the buses independently. And it's almost a redundant question, because if my DLA is taken away from me in the next few years, I'm not going to get to that position anyway. DLA is what got me through my A-levels, it's what got me to university, it's what got me through all my jobs, the jobs that enable me to be a taxpayer and contribute to society. Mm. If DLA is taken away from me and I won't have mobility and I won't have a car, then how am I going to get to work? I can't use the transport system. So, you know, it's a moot question. I won't get there.
Well, but my point is that because the DLA is being replaced by the independent assessment, my point is that when you're earning a lot of money, do you really need that allowance?
I think that depends on what somebody's large amount of money is. I think that depends, would I be a high earner with maybe a husband out of work and 4 children? I don't think you can just say, you earn this much money, therefore you don't get it. Like in any form of assessment, you would need to look at all the circumstances. Yeah. And that's the thing with the DLA assessments. The reason there is so much fear is because the track record with the IB and ESA assessments are that they're not looking at the full picture. There's an 8-page questionnaire. The questionnaires used to be about 60 pages to get a full picture. Now it's, you know, 8 pages, can you lift a cardboard box? How does that tell you whether or not I'm suitable for work?
But do you think it's, just on that assessment, I mean, do you think the assessment is insulting?
Yeah, I think it's insulting. I think it's there to take money. It's not there for reform. It's there to take the money.
Well, clearly, the aim here is to make savings, and I don't think we should start from the position that £12 billion, that's about twice what we spend on unemployment benefit, is necessarily being perfectly, optimally spent. And looking through some of the statistics, I'm worried that a large number of the claims are made with kind of casual reference to a GP. The important thing is to actually have a robust process which is still trustworthy, and that maybe it will turn out that all 3.2 million people claiming are legitimately claiming. I'm not
most
maybe it will.
DLA to be awarded it. It's not just a letter from your GP.
But it has
it's a full assessment.
But it has been an extraordinary rise in the numbers, which doesn't seem to be met by any other method of measuring disability.
What do you ascribe the rise? I mean, there has been an exponential rise since 1992 of 2 billion. 2 million, sorry.
But I think it's ostensibly the same as what we were saying earlier. Yeah. Yes, there's less people on incapacity, but certainly more, you know, claiming the right kind of benefit to enable them to become part of society and part of the society that they deem is achievable for them. I think it's just about the fact that people are choosing the right options for them and using that in the right way.
But isn't it also going to be something, you know, that you can attribute also to advances in medical science and people being able to live a healthy life as a disabled person? There used to be, you know, an idea that if you were disabled, you were sickly, you were ill, you were unhealthy. But, you know, as you can see in the Paralympics, you can be disabled and you can be healthy. You just need the help with mobility issues.
I think the government is redefining disability, so many conditions won't qualify for the benefit. And it may be hard to understand, but most disabled people want to work. Yeah. They want to contribute. I myself have found it so hard in my life to ask for help. And under this new system, we're forcing disabled people to have to beg in a very humiliating way for basic rights.
But do you accept that some people have been claiming what you shouldn't have been claiming?
Yes, I said before, the ESA fraud rate is 0.3, DLA fraud rate is 0.5. These are tiny amounts, and I just want to point out that fraud rate of DLA costs £60 million, whereas DLA reforms are costing £710 million.
Well, your numbers differ markedly from the guesstimate of the government there, and I don't know who's right or who's wrong.
These are government figures.
It just seems to, well, the government's view is that they can save a fortune by going down this route. That's their view. They may be proven to be wrong, But for something that's costing £12 billion a year and is being applied to 3.2 million people, I think, although it needs to be done sensitively and carefully, it opens the question of whether we really are getting the right money to the right place.
But that's we're getting the right money to the right people. But the point about that surely is that if the government's attitude is, it's not a case of an open look at this, we definitely want to save money, surely that is inculcated in Atos.
Yes, I mean, I think that they have reached a view that there are likely claimants who don't need the money, but that does not mean that looking through this substantial welfare budget should be seen as an attack on people who really do need help in our society in order to fully enter the workplace.
I'd like to ask Mark one question.
You're really running out of time.
Say that if the government really wants to save money, why aren't they going after the 100 billion estimated figure that they're losing in tax every year to wealthy individuals?
Well, I think the government should save money across the board, not just in one area, in as many areas as they can.
Thank you all very much indeed.